father and went to the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus was ruling over Judea in place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there. And after being warned in a dream, he went away to the district of Galilee. There he made his home in a town called Nazareth, so that what had been spoken through the prophets might be fulfilled. He will be called a Nazarene. The word of God for the people of God. Praise be to God.
Today is the first Sunday of Epiphany, which is a season of the church, just like Christmas and Advent and Easter. And Epiphany means to make manifest, or to make solid, to make it real. It's a season of the Christian year where we typically focus on the events that proved Jesus' identity, especially his divine identity. And so it starts with the appearance of the star in the sky, signifying the birth of a new king. And then typically the second Sunday we focus on Jesus' baptism and the words that are spoken by God, "This is my son with whom I am well pleased." We usually then go on to look at the miracles that Jesus performed, and it culminates in the transfiguration on the mount, where Jesus was revealed in all of his glory with Moses on one side and Elijah at the other. And the plan had been to focus on Jesus' baptism this Sunday as we renew our own vows. But I decided to back us up a little bit in light of everything that's happened this week. Because there is a part of the Christmas story that, we usually prefer to skip over. Because it doesn't fit into our beautiful nativity scene. But it is right there on the very same page. You see, the wise men didn't actually visit the Christ child that night with the shepherds and the angels. The wise men came a little bit later, probably around the time that Jesus was a toddler, 1 or 2 years old. And they came searching for the new king that had been born. So the first place that they stopped was the palace to check and see if a new king had been born. But when they got there, they found no baby. And King Herod became very nervous and upset at their predictions. So he gathered all of his priests and his scribes, and he asked them what they thought about this, if they could identify where this new king had been born. And the scribes said, after searching prophecies, maybe in Bethlehem. And so the wise men set off to Bethlehem to find this baby that they were looking for. And Herod tells them, "Great, and make sure that when you find him, that you come back and tell me so that I can worship him." Of course, they knew that that's not what he wanted to do. So they went home a different route. And King Herod, in his fear and his anger and his desperation to snuff out any threat to his power, does the unthinkable and has all of the children in and around Bethlehem killed. I don't want to even think about it. I certainly don't want to preach on this. Can't we just skip it? We could, in fact, we plan to just skip over it this year. But given this week's events, again, I could not skip it. Because there is so much in this story that meets us right where we are. We have just finished celebrating Christmas and rejoicing and celebrating. And then the next moment, we are thrown into suffering and chaos. We are reminded that God hasn't come to do away with suffering, but has come to be present with us in it, to redeem it, to transform it. We would rather our Messiah come as a powerful king to vanquish everything that stands in our way. And instead, our incarnate God comes as the most vulnerable baby. This young couple, Mary and Joseph, now with a baby that they really hadn't planned for, are forced to flee in the middle of the night to avoid this horrific violence. They have to go where they don't know anyone, where they don't speak the language, where they don't have work lined up for them. I mean, can you imagine picking up and moving and starting over? And yet they do just that. They get up and they go. They accept God's guidance in their life, and they follow it. They adapt. They start over. Tragedy and suffering is never planned or convenient when it comes. It happens when we least expect it, in the middle of our joy. And our challenge is to hold both the joy and the suffering, and to not look away from either. When we focus solely on the joy and just decide to skip over the hard parts, when we turn away from our own pain and the pain of others, we become apathetic. We cannot fulfill our baptismal vow to resist evil, injustice, and oppression in whatever forms they present themselves if we don't look at them, if we skip over it and ignore it. As Christians, we can't turn a blind eye to the injustices that are happening around us, the suffering of our fellow humans, the plight of refugees, the healthcare crisis and the mental healthcare crisis of our country, the environmental issues, and of course, and those are just the tip of the iceberg. There are so many things. But we also can't focus just on the suffering and forget about our joy. We all know people who have done that in their lives. They've been hurt or wounded, and so they've refused to love again. They can get consumed in their anger and in their bitterness. We have to hold both of them, or our hearts will become hardened to the joy in our midst. Because even when the floor is falling out from beneath us, there are still things to be grateful for. For Mary and Joseph, the fact that the wise men came and presented these gifts allowed them the very resources to be able to pick up and leave and move to someplace else and start again. That was something to be grateful for. They had each other still, and God was with them in more ways than they knew. Like Mary and Joseph, we learn to take one day at a time, trusting in God to reveal the next step for us. Jesus said that we don't need to worry about tomorrow because today has enough troubles of its own. the presence of the wise men, and the prophecies that are revealed in this story. Help us to know it's okay to rely on the help of others. And that also maybe one day down the road, we'll be able to look back and see how the pieces of our lives fit together to make us into the people that we've become. I wonder, in fact, if Jesus' deep compassion for the Gentiles and the foreigners wasn't born out of his time spent in Egypt. Maybe he had a playground friend that was a Samaritan. But the most humbling part of this whole story is how willing Mary and Joseph were to get up and go. And you know, we have a tradition in the Methodist Church of remembering our baptism at the beginning of the year, of rededicating our lives to God as we start over. The same time that we're planning our resolutions for the year and setting our goals, we remember who we are and whose we are. We ask for forgiveness and we pledge our hearts back to God. Candace and I had decided to include a recitation of John Wesley's covenant prayer this year, which is in your bulletins. You can look at it. I will say this. It is a lot harder to read if you are in a place of suffering currently. It's hard. These are not easy words for any of us to read. I believe they are powerful words that transform our inner posture to one of submission. But it is okay if you can't read these words this morning. We're not going to kick you out. But if you have the courage, the willingness to go where God leads, to take this next step one day at a time, I'd like to invite you all to recite this prayer with me. I am no longer my own, but thine. Put me into what thou wilt. Rank me with whom thou wilt. Put me to doing. Put me to suffering. Let me be employed by thee, or laid aside by thee. Exalted for thee, or brought low for thee. Let me be full. Let me be empty. Let me have all things. Let me have nothing. I freely and heartily yield all things to thy pleasure and disposal. And now, O glorious and blessed God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, thou art mine, and I am thine. So be it. And the covenant which I have made on earth, let it be ratified in heaven. Amen. If you'll join me in your hymnals on page 50, as we remember our baptism, we remember that we are part of God's family this morning. Brothers and sisters in Christ, through the sacrament of baptism, we are initiated into Christ's holy church. We are incorporated into God's mighty acts of salvation and given new birth through water and the Spirit. All this is God's gift, offered to us without price. Through the reaffirmation of our faith, we renew the covenant declared at our baptism, acknowledge what God is doing for us, and affirm our commitment to Christ's holy church. So on behalf of the church, I ask you, do you renounce the spiritual forces of wickedness, reject the evil powers of this world, and repent